Before we start, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. Keep one clear rule in your head as we go. A real burial leaves a triangle you can touch, the cemetery register with a plot number, the county death certificate with a doctor and a witness, and a freight or undertaker record that explains how a body reached the ground. If one point of that triangle is missing, you have a clerical mistake. If two are missing, you have a scheme. The year is 1907, the months just before statehood, on the border where Indian Territory will become Oklahoma. The ground is red and hard when dry. Cemeteries here serve towns, churches, and families who fence one corner of prairie from stock. A woman named Clara Boone keeps the register at Oak Hill Cemetery outside a rail stop called Wister Creek. She is precise. She writes the plot grid by hand, and she will not let you claim a corner if the deed is wrong. On a Monday, she is copying weekend burials from the undertaker's slips into the index when a teacher from 3 miles west arrives with an odd request. She wants to know which of 2 graves marked the same man is the correct one. The name on both stones is John H. Willoughby. The dates match. The epitaphs match word for word. The teacher says her pupils saw both on Decoration Day when families placed flags on veterans. One stone sits under a pecan at Oak Hill. The other sits on a hill in a churchyard called Blue Gate, 6 miles away. Boone does not argue. She opens her register. Oak Hill shows Willoughby, interment May 24th, undertaker Silas Pruitt, plot B3 North, fee paid in cash by widow. She notes the small cross in the margin she uses for confirmed veterans. She writes a note to herself to fetch the burial card, which includes the undertaker's coffin size and who stood at the grave. Then she does what few caretakers do. She pulls her old index from a shelf and checks whether another Willoughby was recorded in prior years. There is one entry, 1899, different first name. No conflict. She thanks the teacher and says she will walk to Blue Gate that afternoon. Blue Gate is not hers, but the caretaker leaves the index in the vestry cupboard. Boone copies the line. Willoughby, John H., interment May 24th, undertaker Silas Pruitt, plot C5 East, fee marked, paid. Same day, same undertaker. Boone writes both plot numbers on one card. Duplicate dates and the same undertaker are not a copy error. They are a sign that the paperwork is being fed from one hand to 2 books. She visits Silas Pruitt because undertakers are the hub of everything. The first call after a death, the casket order, the hearse, the grave crew, the payment. Pruitt runs a narrow shop that smells like carbolic and pine. He keeps a ledger with coffin sizes, initials, addresses, and charges for washing and dressing. Boone points to May 24th and asks to see Willoughby. Pruitt turns the page and shows a single line. Willoughby, adult male, standard coffin, delivery Oak Hill. Fee collected cash, receipt 217. Nothing about Blue Gate. Boone asks whether Pruitt served Blue Gate that day. He says no, he was short a man and could only manage one service. She asks whether any coffin or shipping crate left for Blue Gate that week. He says no to that too. Boone notices that his receipt book is missing. He says he tore out 3 blanks to start a new pad because the old one was damp. She leaves without pushing further. Boone has enough to take to the county clerk. His name is Elijah Ward. He files death certificates and issues burial permits where required. The county is still a patchwork of territorial and tribal rules, but Ward has a simple rule for himself. No burial should appear in 2 books with the same date and undertaker. Boone places her 2 copied lines on his desk. Ward pulls the Willoughby death certificate. It lists cause of death as consumption, signed by Dr. Merritt out of Poteau, witnessed by a man named Ezra Denton, addressed to a widow at a farm near Wister Creek. The certificate number is sequential for that week. Ward then opens the burial permit book. It shows one permit issued for Willoughby, destination Oak Hill. No permit for Bluegate. He writes down 3 crisp tasks. Confirm Dr. Merritt saw the body. Confirm who Ezra Denton is. Confirm whether a second headstone was ordered through the War Department if Willoughby was a veteran. The doctor is easy to reach. Merritt keeps clean records because he wants county payments to arrive. He confirms he treated Willoughby for 6 months and signed the certificate after a home death. He confirms the body was viewed on May 23rd. He does not know Bluegate. He remembers the undertaker by name because Pruitt asked him whether a military marker would be requested. Boone asks whether Willoughby was a veteran. Merritt says he believes so, with service in the late years of the war between the states, but the widow did not have papers at hand. Merritt sent a note to the county office to file in case the widow pursued a pension. Ward checks his correspondence and finds the note. The witness line is stranger. Ezra Denton is not a neighbor's name that Ward recognizes. The postmaster recognizes it immediately. Miles Dent is an express and freight agent for the railroad who sometimes signs Denton when he works overtime for the telegraph office. He handles shipments marked funeral or human remains. Ward and Boone meet him at the depot. Dent confirms he signed when the undertaker asked for a witness while a coffin was loaded for a short haul to the cemetery road. He says he loaded 1 box only, destination Oak Hill Spur, and issued 1 waybill. He pulls his book and shows the waybill number. There is no second box on any day that week for Bluegate. He then adds a detail that matters. A second set of charges was posted that same afternoon for a headstone crate billed to Bluegate Church. The crate came from Kruger Marble Works, the stone-cutting yard in Poteau. Dent says those crates are common after Decoration Day, and he did not see the inscription, only the weight and consignee. Ward copies the crate number and thanks him. 2 graves with 1 body prove nothing by themselves. A duplicate stone does not mean money was stolen. Ward wants to know whether the duplicate stone matches a headstone order that the War Department ships free to veterans' graves. Those orders run through 1 paper path. Application for headstone for unmarked grave, War Department Form 623. A widow or commander of a post can file it. The stone yard that carves government markers logs the name and the template number supplied by the military. Ward visits Kruger Marble Works. Kruger keeps 2 ledgers, 1 for private stones and 1 for War Department stones. The government book lists veteran names, regiment, unit, date of death, and a template code that controls the face layout. The code changes by year. Ward asks for Willoughby. Kruger runs a finger down June and stops. He shows an entry for Willoughby, J.H., 17th Kansas Cavalry, template 1906A, shipped to Oak Hill. Crate number matches the one the rail agent gave. He then flips a page and shows a second entry 3 days later. Willoughby, J.H., 17th Kansas Cavalry, template 1906A, shipped to Bluegate Church, different crate number, fee marked paid. Ward asks whether the War Department paid both. Kruger says the government paid 1. The second is marked private and paid cash. He cannot produce a receipt because his receipt book for that week is missing. He shrugs and says, salesman borrowed it. Boone and Ward look at each other. Missing books multiply around cash. Ward asks Kruger how he prevents duplicate veteran stones. Kruger says the War Department sends a single authorization slip per veteran with the cemetery name written in. He pulls Willoughby's slip from an envelope. It says Oak Hill. It does not say Bluegate. Ward asks why a second was cut. Kruger says he received a private order on his own paper with a sketch, signed by the Blue Gate Church Committee, not the government. Ward asks to see that order slip. Kruger says it must have been misfiled. He offers to look later. Ward notes the template and the spacing, which match exactly between the two entries. Matching layout means someone used the government template twice, which is not permitted. Boone and Ward now have a pattern worth testing wider than one name. Boone walks Oak Hill and notes every new veteran stone in the last 6 months. She writes names and dates. She then walks Blue Gate, then 2 more cemeteries that share families with Oak Hill. She returns with 6 names that appear twice within a 15-mile circle. All 6 are veterans. All 6 have identical inscriptions, sometimes including the same carving error in a middle initial. Ward spreads the names on his desk and tells Boone to pull the county death certificates on each. She does. 3 of the 6 certificates list the same undertaker, Silas Pruitt. The other 3 list a second undertaker who sometimes runs work through Pruitt when he is ill. All 6 certificates list either Miles Dent or one of his rail hands as the witness on the death certificate, not a family member. All 6 certificates list one burial permit only, always for the cemetery that is closer to the widow's farm. If the second graves are real, there should be purchases or plot deeds in those church books. Boone returns to Blue Gate's cupboard and pulls the plot deed book. It shows a deed sale for Willoughby to a man named Amos Tate, not to the widow. The date is 2 days after the burial. The fee is cash. The Blue Gate Register lists the burial on the same day as Oak Hill, yet the deed is later and to another man. Boone asks the pastor who Amos Tate is. He says Tate donates to the church and helps with funerals. Boone asks whether Tate has family buried at Blue Gate. He says no. She asks whether Tate attended Willoughby's service. The pastor says he believes he did not see him there. Ward goes back to Kruger. He asks for private invoices linked to Amos Tate. Kruger finally produces a slim file. It holds 4 order slips paid in cash for veteran stones with the same template code as the government. 3 are for names on Boone's list. The 4th is for a name neither Boone nor Ward has seen yet. The ship-to line is always a church or family ground that is not the cemetery on the government slip. The cash payer line reads A. Tate each time. Kruger says Tate pays for families who are poor and wants no thanks. Ward does not write down the compliment. He writes the crate numbers and dates and copies the inscriptions, including the unit and the spacing. Ward now sits with the treasurer because a pension flows through county offices even when the money comes from Washington. Widows sign quarterly receipts in the post office for federal pension money, but many also receive small county allowances. The treasurer's Relief Widows of Soldiers page shows 6 names. The addresses match the certificates for 5. One shows a forwarding address care of a boarding house in town. Ward asks whether any of these widows signed more than once a quarter. The treasurer points to a pencil note. One widow reported she did not receive the June pension. The postmaster records show it was paid. Someone signed at the window, name written slowly, letters not the widow's hand. The clerk believes he knows which clerk paid it. Ward writes down that clerk's name and tells Boone to find that widow today. Boone and Boone's brother, who owns a wagon, go to the widow's farm. The widow says she did not go to town in June, that she was ill, that no one took her papers. She says a churchman named Tate brought flowers with a card and asked whether she had applied for the war stone yet. She said the undertaker told her it would be handled. The widow also says someone from the undertaker's shop came by to measure the doorway and ask about pallbearers. Boone asks whether the man asked for any documents. The widow says he asked to see her husband's service paper and his pension certificate to copy the unit for the stone. She let him copy it. Boone asks whether the papers were returned. The widow says yes, but the unit is carved on the stone at Oak Hill, and there was no need to copy another time. Ward returns to Pruitt and asks for the removal permits or exhumation orders tied to any of the 6 names. Pruitt says there were none because there were no removals. Ward then asks whether Pruitt has ever returned an empty casket shell to the rail yard after a funeral. Pruitt pauses and says sometimes wooden shells are reused for private families who cannot pay full price. He says he does not return them by rail. Ward asks the rail agent whether any funeral car was billed for return of empty shells that month. Dent says 2 shells were returned east as packing, not as funerals, and were billed under general freight. He says he did not know shells returned. He shows the waybills. The consigner is Pruitt. The freight is checked by a stamp that reads, "Inspected by M. Dent." Dent says that is his stamp and that he stamps all crates that move through his hands. Boone writes down the waybill numbers. Let us apply the triangle test to Willoughby using the new pieces. Cemetery register at Oak Hill says buried May 24th. County death certificate says died May 23rd, witnessed at the rail platform, undertaker Pruitt handled. Freight waybill shows 1 coffin to Oak Hill Spur, inspected by Dent. Bluegate register says buried May 24th, but there is no county permit for Bluegate and no freight record for a second coffin. Bluegate deed shows a purchase by Amos Tate 2 days later. Kruger Stone Yard shows 1 government headstone authorized to Oak Hill and a second private headstone paid cash by Tate to Bluegate. A shell was returned east as packing after the funeral week. That is not a triangle. That is a line repeated twice with a second stone planted at the other end. Ward tests a second name from Boone's list to be sure the first is not a fluke. The pattern repeats with small changes. The witness on the certificate is again a railman. The undertaker is Pruitt's friend. The headstone appears twice in Kruger's book, 1 government, 1 private cash. The second cemetery deed is to Tate, or to a man who shares an address with Tate in town. The rail yard shows 1 funeral waybill and 1 return of empty shells in the same period. Ward adds a 4th point. The post office shows a pension payment signed at the window by a hand that is not the widow's. Ward now asks the postmaster to produce specimen signatures from the pension cards on the 6 widows. The postmaster is careful because pension fraud is a federal matter, but he allows Ward and Boone to sit at the side table and compare signatures. 2 cards show a hand that matches other letters from those widows. 4 show a slow, careful script that looks like one person trying to imitate 4 different hands. Boone notices 1 extra mark that a clerk would see. The date numbers on the 4 cards lean the same way, and the curl on the 5 has the same hook. If veterans are being duplicated in stone, why would anyone do it? Ward traces the money paths that touch each point. A second grave draws a church fee and a plot deed. A second stone draws a cash price from the payer. A widow who trusts a churchman or an undertaker may let him carry her paper to the post office, where a clerk could pay out if the name matches and no one looks closely at the hand. If a shell is returned as packing and not as a funeral, the rail agent can push it through as freight and no burial waybill is created. Every step pays a small sum. Small sums do not raise newspapers. Small sums every month across many names do. Ward chooses 1 more test that he knows will either collapse the theory or harden it. He wants to know whether the government ever received a second headstone application for any of the 6 names. He writes a wire to the War Department headstone branch with the names and asks for confirmation of shipments and whether any duplicate or replacement was authorized. While he waits, he asks Boone to walk Blue Gate with a measuring rod and record the exact spacing of letters on the private stones. If the layout matches the government template down to line breaks and letter count, then someone is copying the free template onto the cache stone. Boone comes back with close measurements. The lines break the same way. The unit abbreviations are the same. The error in one middle initial appears on both stones for that man. Kruger had said he copied a private sketch for the second stone. Boone's measurements say he copied the government template twice. The wire from Washington returns on Wednesday with dry language. The department shows one headstone authorized and shipped for each of the 6 names consigned to the cemetery listed by the applicant, and no replacements or duplicates authorized. That answer alone does not prove fraud in this county. It proves the government did not order pairs. Ward writes 3 orders on paper he can defend. First, he asks the judge for authority to inspect all cemetery registers within 10 miles for duplicate veteran names with matching dates. Second, he asks permission to take sworn statements from Kruger, Pruitt, Dent, and Amos Tate about the crates, the stones, the shells, and the cash slips. Third, he asks to place a temporary hold at the post office on cashing any pension receipts presented by an agent unless the widow stands at the window or a deputy verifies the agent's identity at the farm gate. The judge signs the inspection and the statements. He says he will think about the post office hold because that reaches federal ground. Ward thanks him and tells Boone to prepare her best list, clean copies, addresses, and plot maps. He says they will start at Blue Gate at daylight with a measuring rod and a camera. He says they will bring Kruger's ledger pages and match each stone to each entry with a ruler and a simple question written on a card that even a pastor will understand. Who paid for this stone? Hold to the same test as before. Real headstones leave a triple trail you can verify: a stonecutter's ledger with name and template, a railway bill with crate number and destination, and a cemetery entry that matches the crate's arrival. If any crate number sits in 2 ledgers or one ledger connects to no waybill, you are looking at a controlled gap. Elijah Ward and Clara Boone start the morning at Kruger Marble Works. Ward asks for the War Department ledger and the private order ledger for the last 6 months. Kruger places both books on the bench. The government book lists veteran name, regiment, template code, shipped to cemetery, and crate number issued from their yard. The private book lists buyer name, inscription sketch, and cash or credit. Ward reads back the 6 duplicate names from Boone's list. Kruger finds each in the government book with a single entry per veteran, template 1906A or 1906B, shipped to Oak Hill in 3 cases and 2 other cemeteries in the rest, each with a unique crate number. Ward asks for the private book under those names. Kruger produces 4 private entries paid in cash by A. Tate with the ship to listed as Blue Gate Church or another secondary ground, each with a different crate number and no template code written, only copy inscription as supplied. Boone notices the wording is careful. As supplied avoids saying as per government template. Ward asks Kruger to explain how crate numbers are assigned. Kruger says they stencil a sequential number on the wood when a stone is packed, and they copy that number into the ledger and onto a shipping ticket for the rail agent. Ward asks who writes the number into the ledger. Kruger says the foreman. Ward asks to see the foreman's daily ticket book. Kruger hesitates, then brings it. The foreman's tickets show the same crate numbers Ward just read in both ledgers, plus weights. 2 of the private Tate orders have weights within 2 pounds of the government stones for the same name, which is normal because the stones are the same size when cut on the same template. Ward copies crate numbers, weights, and dates for all 10 entries and closes the books. He tells Kruger to expect sworn statements later. Kruger asks whether he is being accused of fraud. Ward replies that he is collecting numbers. At the depot, rail agent Miles Dent pulls the waybill books. He locates the government shipments by crate number in Kruger's handwriting and matches them to freight bills billed War Department or U.S. Government, Headstone. He reads out dates and destinations that match the government ledger. He then looks up the 4 private crate numbers. 2 show as General Freight Stone Goods, prepaid cash by A. Tate, consigned to churchyards. 1 shows prepaid to a family plot. The 4th shows prepaid to a lumber yard, citing 1 mile from Bluegate, not the church spur. Dent frowns because stones do not usually go to a lumber yard. He checks the delivery sheet and finds a note. Night delivery, wagon waiting, signature A. Tate for receipt. Ward asks Dent to identify the man called Tate. Dent describes a narrow-shouldered man with a clerk's posture and a clean hatband. Ward writes it down and asks whether any empty casket shells were billed back to Poteau that same week. Dent flips to the car accountant's weight sheet. 2 returns appear as packing shells, billed under general freight, checked by Dent's own stamp, both in the 2 weeks that cover the 6 duplicate names. Dent admits he did not ask why shells were going back. He says it is not his job to question if the bill is correct. Boone asks Dent whether the government stones and the private stones rode on the same trains. Dent says he can tell by the car numbers. He checks. In 2 cases, the private crate rode on the next day's mixed freight, not with the government shipment. In the case of the lumberyard siding, the private crate rode on a late-night local. Ward notes the separation in time because it shows the second delivery was kept away from families at the public spur. Ward brings in the railroad's division auditor, a man named Forbes, who dislikes untidy car weights. Forbes examines the car accountant sheet and points to a small imbalance on the night local that carried the Bluegate private crate. The car left heavier than the sum of its listed freight by a margin that fits a wooden shell. It returned lighter by the same margin after the packing shell entry 2 days later. Forbes writes a clean sentence for himself. 1 wood shell appears to have been carried as unlisted weight on the night the private stone moved to the siding. Next, Ward and Boone go back to cemeteries with a camera and onion skin paper for rubbings. At Oak Hill, they photograph the government stone for Willoughby, close enough to read letter spacing. Boone makes a rubbing, counts characters per line, and traces the unit abbreviations Co. and Regt as they appear. At Bluegate, she makes the same rubbing on the private stone. The line breaks and the spacing match. The error in a middle initial matches. On a second veteran, both stones use inf in a cramped line that squeezes the period. That squeeze only occurs when the cutter follows template 1906A with no manual adjustment. Kruger's ledger had listed 1906A for the government stones. The private ledger had not listed a template. Boone's rubbings show the private stones carry the same template in practice. They meet the sexton at Bluegate. He opens his fee book. It shows cash entries, stone set for 4 of the names. The payer line shows A. Tate in tidy letters. The fee line is small money. Boone asks who set the stones. The sexton says Tate brought laborers, and used the church's two-wheeled dolly. Boone asks why the church allowed a second stone for the same man. The sexton says he does not decide what families wish to do. Boone asks whether the widow was present. The sexton says he does not recall the widow's. He recalls Tate's signature clearly. Ward now cleans up the undertaker's side. He returns to Silas Pruitt with the crate numbers and dates and asks one question that an honest undertaker can answer in 10 seconds. Did Willoughby's coffin leave his shop on May 24th, and did any second coffin leave that week? Pruitt says yes to the first and no to the second. Ward asks whether Pruitt has ever drawn 2 death certificates for one name. Pruitt says no. Ward asks whether Pruitt has ever handled a removal from Oak Hill to Blue Gate. Pruitt says no. Ward asks whether Pruitt has ever allowed anyone to copy a widow's pension certificate. Pruitt admits that he verified a unit inscription from a certificate once at the widow's request, so the stone would be correct. He says that is normal. Ward asks if he keeps copies of pension papers. Pruitt says no. Ward brings in a second undertaker, a man named Harrow, who occasionally trades work with Pruitt. Harrow admits he has sent shells back east for reuse twice when families could not afford a full price. He says he did so as freight, not as funerals, and that he used Dent's stamp. He says he never shipped a body twice and never billed 2 cemeteries. Ward writes his statement and tells him he will swear it later. At the post office, Ward speaks with the assistant postmaster who manages pension windows. She keeps a card file for widows that includes specimen signatures. She confirms what Ward suspected in Chapter 1. 4 of the widow's June receipts show a hand that does not match April. She says on those days a man presented the pension card and said he was the widow's nephew or agent. She says she paid because the name matched and the agent had the card. She remembers a woman with a black hat standing near the door once. She does not remember a widow standing at the window. Ward asks whether the post office ever pays to an agent without a deputy present. She says it happens when widows send a relative. She says there is no county rule against it. Ward writes that answer exactly because it explains how an agent could collect without a scene. Ward returns to Kruger with Boone's rubbings. He lays the rubbings over Kruger's template boards. They line up. He asks Kruger who authorized using the government template for cash stones. Kruger says no one authorized anything. He copied inscriptions. Ward has him bring the private order tickets. One of the tickets is in a hand Boone recognizes from a church ledger and a cemetery deed, Amos Tate's. The ticket says, "Copy as supplied other cemetery." Ward circles the phrase "other cemetery" with a pencil. He asks Kruger whether he would copy a layout that uses a government template code onto a cash stone without a second authorization. Kruger says he would if a church committee signed and paid. Ward writes, "No second authorization" on his pad. Boone insists on one more physical check that takes the dignity out of paperwork and puts it on a table. She asks Dent to bring 2 crate slats from the lumber pile that still carry their stencil numbers. Dent produces 1 slat from the government Willoughby crate and 1 from the Blue Gate private crate. Boone lays the slats beside her rubbings. She labels a photograph with both slat numbers. This gives her an artifact that does not care how men talk. With crate numbers, rubbings, and fee books aligned, Ward moves to link the second stones to money beyond church fees. He asks the bank for small cash orders paid to Kruger in the weeks of the 4 private stones. The bank ledger shows 3 money orders bought for amounts that match Kruger's cash prices for private veteran stones. The buyer line reads AT in a small, neat hand. The clerk who sold them remembers the buyer as a man who did not speak much and a woman who stood by the door. Ward asks for the stub numbers. He ties those to Kruger's ledger dates. He now has a loop. Cash orders to Kruger, private stones cut to match government templates, crates sent on night trains to side spurs, stones set by Tate without widows present, and pension receipts signed by agents at the window. For a final check on the rail side, the division auditor Forbes brings the car scale readings for the nights the private crates moved. He explains a simple fact that makes non-railmen sit up. Every car's weight in and weight out are recorded. If an unlisted heavy item rides along, the difference shows up if you know where to look. On the night the Blue Gate private crate rode, the outbound weight exceeded listed freight by approximately the weight of a woodshell. 2 days later, a packing shell entry returned east at a weight that matches a shell with hardware removed. Forbes puts both lines on one sheet and writes, "Suspected unbilled shall return." Ward does not say the word fraud yet. He says the pattern cannot be an accident 6 times in a row. He returns to the judge with 3 requests he can justify line by line. 1. Permission to subpoena Kruger's private ticket book and foreman ticket book for all cash veteran stones paid by A. Tate. 2. Authority to seize from Tate any documents, ledgers, or draft orders related to headstones and to take an inventory of his church committee papers. 3. An order to place a temporary deputy at the pension window to require widows to appear in person for the next payout until the investigation finishes. The judge signs the first 2 orders and says the third will require a federal conversation. Ward says he understands. He hands the signed subpoenas to the sheriff. He tells Boone to make 3 neat envelopes labeled by name with rubbings, crate slat photos, fee-book copies, and ledger lines. He says each envelope will have a number, and that number will match the waybill and the stone. He says they are going to ask Amos Tate for his books, and they are going to bring a camera. Use 1 strict test for pensions. A lawful pension payment leaves 4 points: the widow's original certificate and claim file, the quarterly receipt signed by the widow at the post office window, the postal money order or cash book entry that matches the payout, and the bank or store redemption that turns that order into cash. If any payout shows up on 2 of those points without the other 2, something is wrong. If a payout shows on all 4, but the handwriting or identity is wrong, someone is stealing with paperwork. Elijah Ward starts at the county desk with what he can control. He copies the 6 names Clara Boone flagged as double stones. For each widow, he builds a thin folder: death certificate, burial permit, cemetery page, undertaker ledger line, and Kruger's crate data. He numbers the folders 1 through 6. He carries them to the post office and asks to see the federal pension cards and quarterly receipt slips for those widows for April, May, and June. The assistant postmaster lays the cards on a side table. Each card holds a specimen signature taken when the widow first presented her certificate. Each quarter adds a short receipt slip with the date, the paid amount, and the signature line. Ward places April and June side by side for each name. On 4 of the 6, April shows a shaky personal hand that matches letters in the widow's farm receipts. June shows a slow, careful hand with round loops and neat 5s that hook the same way on every card. Ward measures the slant with a ruler edge. He notes the pressure points where the pen lifts. He asks who paid those days. The assistant points to cashier marks. One clerk, Mr. Mather, paid all 4 June slips. Ward speaks to Mather in the back office with the window closed. He lowers his voice because accusing a federal clerk is a fast way to lose cooperation. He asks about agents. Mather says relatives or agents sometimes bring a widow's card. If the name matches and the certificate number is correct, he pays. He says on those 4 days, a man said he was a nephew. He showed the card and named the widow. Mather paid the standard amount and made the entry in the cash book. Ward asks whether the widow stood at the window. Mather says no. A woman in a black hat stood near the door once. Mather says he did not ask for a deputy because the rule is loose unless the department warns otherwise. Ward asks to see the post office cash book for those dates and the money order register. For a pension, the post office often pays cash, but widows sometimes convert part of it to money orders to pay debts. The book shows 4 cash payouts on the same day within 40 minutes. The money order register shows 3 orders purchased within the hour by A.T. to Kruger Marble Works and 1 to a church treasurer at Blue Gate. The amounts match Kruger's private veteran stone prices and the church's stone set fees. Ward copies the order numbers. He asks who wrote A.T. The assistant says the buyer wrote it. She remembers clean gloves with ink at the fingertips. Ward crosses the square to Farm and Mercantile Bank. He asks for redemption stubs on those money orders. The teller retrieves the pack. 3 orders were redeemed by Kruger within 2 days. The 4th was redeemed by the Blue Gate treasurer the same afternoon. Teller initials match K, the same hand Kent used on the auxiliary case months back. Ward writes the stub numbers onto each widow's folder. He now has a loop on paper: pension cash out, money orders to Kruger and the church, private stones shipped at night, and double markers on ground. Next, Ward needs to test the federal side of each widow's claim to rule out legitimate second payments or replacements. He wires the Pension Bureau for confirmation of the last 3 quarters paid to each widow, the recorded pay station, and whether any power of attorney or agent letter is on file. The reply the next morning is clean. All 6 widows are paid on schedule through the local post office. No agent letters are on file. No transfers of pay station are recorded. The Bureau adds a line Ward writes down. No duplicate warrants were issued for June. Clara Boone handles the identity work. She rides to 3 farms with a deputy and a set of copied receipt slips. She does not ask the widows to perform penmanship. She asks simple questions a liar gets wrong. Did you go to town in June? Did you send a nephew? Did you sign anything at the window? 2 widows say they were ill and did not travel. One says she sent her sister to buy flour, not to collect a pension. All 3 say a church man named Tate came by before Decoration Day to help with the stone request and to check the unit information. All 3 say an undertaker's helper asked to copy the pension certificate to get the unit correct. All 3 say their husband's stone was set at Oak Hill and they did not ask for a second. Ward takes sworn statements. He notes the dates and the names present. He writes no agent letter on file on each statement. He signs as witness and has the deputy sign. He logs the time. He places the statements in the 3 matching folders. The cash loop now has a name in the middle: Amos Tate. Ward asks the bank for Tate's deposits in June and early July. The manager does not like that question. Ward shows the subpoena signed yesterday for any ledger entries or deposits tied to A. Tate and any church committees he manages. The manager yields a tidy list: 3 small deposits the day after money orders were redeemed, each an amount just under the sum of a church fee and a stone setting labor charge. one withdrawal for cash in an amount that matches the transport and labor for moving heavy stones. Ward adds those figures to his pad. He does not accuse the bank. He thanks the manager and walks out. Now he needs to square the witness line on the death certificates, because a forged death chain often starts there. All 6 certificates list the witness as a railman, Miles Dent, or one of his helpers. Ward returns to the depot. He asks Dent how often he signs as a witness to death. Dent says almost never. He signs witness to shipment at the platform for funeral freight. He says if Pruitt asked him to sign a line on a certificate while the coffin passed him, he might have signed without reading the heading. Ward flips one certificate around. The printed word is witness. It does not say to death. Dent grimaces and says he will not sign again. Ward writes an instruction card for Dent to keep at the scale. Do not sign any certificate unless it says witness to shipment. Ward still needs the person who turned pension cash into money orders and then into private stones. He already suspects Tate. He wants one more clean link he can hold in front of a judge. He asks Kruger to produce any private order sketches in Tate's hand. Kruger produces 2 slips. The slips say, "Copy as supplied other cemetery," with the same tidy letters Boone saw in the Bluegate deed and fee book. Ward asks Kruger to write a receipt from memory for one of those orders. Kruger tries and fails to reproduce the exact price and date. Ward writes, "Missing receipt book covers orders in question," in his notes. He will not fight that fact today. Boone proposes a quick test that does not require handwriting experts. A man who copies inscriptions from a government stone to a private stone will carry the exact same spacing errors to save time. She sets 2 rubbings on the bench and overlays them with tracing paper. Each co sits 3 characters from the left edge. Each rect breaks at the same letter. Even the little stonecutter tick that separates unit and regiment is at the same height, a scratch unique to one board. She says any man who hand-set a second layout would not reproduce a scratch. Ward photographs the overlay. Now Ward pulls a thread on the undertaker end that everyone avoids because good undertakers bury the county's grief. He asks Pruitt for his agent book, the list of men who help carry bodies and handle errands. Pruitt offers the names. Tate's name is there with the note, "Arrangements, Stones." Ward asks whether Pruitt ever gave Tate a widow's pension card for errand help. Pruitt says he does not remember. Ward asks whether Tate ever carried cash for families who could not leave the farm. Pruitt says he believes Tate has delivered envelopes for widows. Ward writes that answer without comment and tells the deputy to swear it later. The last internal piece before he moves to seizures is the traveling notary. In schemes like this, a notary often attests to true copy of service paper or identity of widow to smooth a window payment. The notary in town is a man named Bliss. Ward asks for Bliss's acknowledgment register. Bliss flips to Spring. He shows 4 acknowledgments for copy of service paper for headstone request, signed at the undertaker's shop, each for one of the 6 names. Ward checks the identity line. The signer is A. Tate, agent. Bliss says the widow could not travel and that Tate promised to deliver papers. Ward compares the date to the pension window payout date. The acknowledgment and the payout fall on the same day in 2 cases. Ward writes, "Notary attest plus window payout same day," and asks Bliss whether he checked an agent letter from the widow. Bliss says no. He saw a pension certificate and a death certificate, both proper. He thought that was enough. Ward notes, "No agent letter." At this point, Ward can present a clean path for one name from death to duplicate stone to cash. He chooses Willoughby because the papers are strongest. He writes the chain on one sheet, death certificate signed by Dr. Merritt and witnessed at rail platform by Miles Dent, while a coffin was shipped once to Oak Hill. Burial permit for Oak Hill only. War Department headstone authorization shipped to Oak Hill. Crate number 683, government ledger entry matched. Private headstone order 3 days later, in Kruger's private book, paid cash by A. Tate. Crate number 701, freight to Bluegate at night via lumberyard siding. Cemetery fee book at Bluegate shows stone set, payer A. Tate. Pension payout at post office in June, signed in a hand not matching widow specimen. Cashier Mather paid. Cash book entry recorded. Money orders bought within the hour by A.T. to Kruger and Bluegate treasurer. Stubs redeemed at bank. Return freight of packing shell within the same 2-week window. Car weights show unlisted shell moved on the night train that carried private stone. He adds the rubbings overlay and the photo of crate slats with matching stencils. He pins the notary's acknowledgement for copy of service paper with Tate's signature to the same board. He hands the board to the judge. The judge does not need a speech. He issues 3 narrow orders Ward can execute today. First, seize from Amos Tate any ledgers, order slips, pension cards, or church committee papers related to headstones, pensions, or widows' funds. Second, place a deputy at the post office pension window for the next payout day to require widow presence, or if an agent appears, a signed agent letter verified at the farm before cash is released. Third, subpoena Kruger's missing receipt book and the foreman's ticket book. If the receipt book cannot be produced, the court will accept Boone's rubbings as matching template proof for the private stones. Ward serves the Tate warrant at 2 in the afternoon. Tate is in his room above the feed store, where Dobbs kept his office in the earlier case. The room holds 1 trunk, 1 desk, and a bundle of church flyers. The desk has 2 drawers. Ward opens the first. Inside are folded order slips for stones in names Boone already listed, plus 1 more. Each slip says, "Copy as supplied other cemetery," in the same tidy hand. Several slips carry numbers that match money order stubs from the post office. Ward photographs each slip before placing it in an envelope. He opens the second drawer. It holds a stack of pension receipt stubs with dates and amounts and a thin wallet with 4 widow names written on folded cards. Each card is a pension card. Ward does not touch them yet. He calls the deputy and the postmaster to the room before he moves the cards. He wants witnesses. The postmaster arrives and identifies the cards as genuine. He reads the certificate numbers. They match the 6 names. He points to the June line and the A of a signature that is not a widow's hand. Ward logs each card into evidence with 2 witnesses and seals the envelope. He writes on the outside that the cards were found in Tate's desk, second drawer, at 2:48 in the afternoon, in the presence of 2 named witnesses. Ward returns to the bank with the new name from Tate's slips. Teller Kent finds a matching money order redeemed 3 days earlier. Ward adds that stub to folder 7, now a live case he did not expect this morning. He asks Kent to alert him if Tate or a woman in a black hat approaches the rear office on the next pension day. Kent agrees and writes the instruction under the counterblotter. Finally, Ward preps a controlled test at the pension window to close the loop cleanly. He chooses a widow who reported a missed June payment. He sends a deputy to sit at her kitchen table on payout day. If any agent arrives at the window claiming to carry her card, the deputy will already be with her. If the widow walks in with the deputy, the window will see the real hand. Ward writes 2 short instructions and gives them to the assistant postmaster and to Mather. Pay only in the presence of the widow or a deputy. Compare the signature to the specimen on the card. Keep the slip for the court. On payout day, a man in a soft hat steps to the window at 9:20 with a pension card for one of the 6 widows. The assistant postmaster asks him to wait. She telephones Ward. He brings the deputy and the widow to the counter. The widow looks at her card in the man's hand and says it has been out of the house since Decoration Day. Ward asks the man for his name. He says Amos Tate. Ward asks Tate whether he holds any agent letter from this widow. Tate says no. Ward asks him to empty his pockets. Tate places a small rubber stamp used for received on church pledges, 3 folded order slips, and a fountain pen with blue ink on the counter. The deputy cuffs him with no speech. Ward files the day's items into the folders by number. He writes a 1-line summary the judge can read without coffee. 4 widows paid in June to an agent without letters. Money orders to Kruger and a church treasurer. Duplicate stones set at secondary grounds using government template layouts. Shells returned as freight. Pension cards found in Tate's desk. Agent caught at the window while the widow stood beside the counter. He signs the summary and hands it to the clerk. Set one last rule. Before you accuse a cemetery of fraud, prove the stone and the grave match. That means 4 checks. The stone's hidden quarry stamp, the base pins and mortar age, the cemetery register against the plot deed, and any exhumation only after the first 3 fail. Elijah Ward lays his folders on the judge's table and asks for the narrowest tool possible. He does not want to disturb families if hardware and numbers can answer the question. He asks for 2 orders. First, permission to lift, not dig. 1 duplicate private stone at Bluegate, long enough to inspect the base pins and underside stamps, with the sexton present and photographs taken. Second, authority to exhume 1 grave only if the first inspection shows a false stone on an empty plot. The judge signs both and sets limits in writing. The lift crew must be the sexton, a deputy, and Kruger's foreman. Any exhumation must be supervised by the doctor who signed the certificate. They go to Bluegate at noon. The sun is high. Boone brings rubbings. Dent brings the crate slats. Kruger's foreman brings 2 iron bars and the lifting dolly. The sexton signs the log. They choose the Willoughby private stone because its paperwork is strongest, and the widow has consented in writing to resolve the dispute. The sexton chisels out the mortar line at the base. The foreman slides the bars under the stone and edges it onto the dolly. They roll it forward 12 inches. Ward photographs the base and the pad. Government stones carry a small quarry stamp on the underside edge that marks batch and year. Private stones may carry none or a shop mark. The Bluegate private stone carries a faint stamp that reads 06KR, the same quarry code that appears under the Oak Hill government stone when you look at its earlier repair photograph. Boone points to the anchor pins. The pins in this base are new steel, bright and straight. The mortar around them is light and gritty. Oak Hill's pins are older and dark. The pad at Bluegate shows a void under one corner big enough for a hand. That void should not exist if a heavy stone has sat there since spring. The sexton says he set this pad last month when Tate brought men to fix a tilt. Ward photographs the void, the pins, and the stamp. He logs the time. The judge's order allows exhumation if the base inspection fails, but Ward still checks the register and deed once more on paper. Bluegate's deed shows a purchase by A. Tate 2 days after the funeral. The cemetery register shows burial the same day as Oak Hill. The undertaker ledger shows one coffin, Oak Hill only. If a body lies here, there will be a coffin tag or a shroud pin, and a grave depth consistent with an adult. Ward reads the order aloud for the record. Dr. Merritt stands ready. The sexton cuts the sod and starts a careful trench at the head. They go down past the pad depth, then past the depth a coffin would leave. 16 inches, 24, 30. They hit hard clay with no coffin board, no shroud pin, and no airspace. Dr. Merritt calls halt. Ward photographs the trench and the measuring rod. They backfill it once and smooth the sod. Boone writes, "No coffin present," in the margin of the Blue Gate page with the pastor watching. Ward repeats the lift-only check at 2 more duplicate stones the next day. The pattern holds. The private stones show the same quarry stamp as the government stones, fresh pins, light mortar, and pads that do not carry true weight. The registers show burials on the same day as the real cemetery and deeds purchased later by Tate or a man who shares his address. Ward now has a method he can show a grand jury without asking for more shovels. On the undertaker front, a delivery man brings a message to the depot that evening. A crate is on the platform marked "Church Supplies" for a westbound local. The crate weight matches a stone. The sender line reads, "A. Tate." Dent holds the crate on Ward's instruction. Ward arrives with the sheriff. They pry aboard. Inside lies a stone face down with "Copy as supplied" chalked on the back and the same 06 KR stamp on the bottom edge. No order slip from a family sits inside. Ward seals the crate and logs it for court. Tate sees the hold notice and tries to leave town that night on the 9:30 mixed. He carries a flat parcel and a roll of papers. Deputy Keener is on the platform and asks him to step into the office with no scene. The flat parcel holds Blue Gate fee books and the church treasurer's cash envelope for stone set. The roll of papers holds Kruger's missing receipt book for June with 4 pages cut out. Tate says he meant to return them. Keener logs the seizure and marches him across to the jail. Court opens at 10 with a short docket and a full table. Ward calls only the witnesses whose hands touch steel and ink. The sexton describes the lift, the pins, the new mortar, and the empty trench. Kruger's foreman identifies the quarry stamp and explains why 2 stones with the same 06 KR code for one veteran are abnormal. Dent identifies the crate and the night delivery note to the lumber siding. The assistant postmaster testifies to the money orders bought within an hour of the pension payouts to Kruger and the Blue Gate treasurer. The bank teller confirms redemption. Bliss, the notary, admits he acknowledged agent copies without agent letters. Dr. Merritt confirms he did not view a second body for Blue Gate. Boone lays the rubbings and crate slats in a row and reads the measurements. Ward keeps counts and statutes plain. On the county side, obtaining property by false pretenses for the second stones and church fees. Forging or altering public records for cemetery registers and deeds entered after the fact. Attempted theft by deception at the depot with the church supplies crate. On the state side, tied to documents, misuse of a notarial acknowledgement to aid fraud. He says the pension fraud counts, and any crime tied to the federal pension window sit with the United States Attorney. He asks the court to bind over Tate on the county counts and to issue seizure orders for any remaining private duplicate stones paid for by Tate's cash. Defense says the county is criminalizing charity. They say Tate helped poor families get stones the government was slow to ship. They say duplicate inscriptions are a sign of respect, not deceit. They say new mortar proves a repair, not a fake. They say an empty trench proves nothing because perhaps the grave is elsewhere on the plot. They ask the court to bar photographs of the trench because they will scare the public. The judge allows the photographs because they show measurements, not a body. Defense then says the pension window practice is federal and the county should not mention it. Ward repeats his line once, clearly. The pension counts will go federal. Today's hearing is about stones, fees, and records the county controls. The judge makes 3 findings and writes them as he speaks. 1. The Blue Gate Willoughby plot shows a private stone with a quarry stamp that matches the government stamp for the Oak Hill stone, fresh hardware and mortar, a pad that did not carry true weight, and a trench with no coffin evidence. 2. The church fee and deed for that plot post-date the Oak Hill funeral and were paid and arranged by Amos Tate, who also bought money orders that match Kruger's private stone charges. 3. A crate with a new duplicate stone marked as church supplies was held at the depot with no family order attached. He binds Tate over on the county counts and orders immediate seizure of any private duplicate stone paid by Tate's cash where the cemetery register and undertaker ledger do not show a second burial. The judge then addresses the line everyone in the room has waited to hear. He states that pension payouts, forged receipts, and any attempt to cash federal instruments are federal crimes and will be referred to the United States Attorney with the county's exhibits. He signs a referral letter on the bench and hands it to Ward in open court. Ward asks for 2 more prophylactic orders. First, a notice to all churches and cemeteries within 10 miles that any headstone request must match a single register line and a single burial permit, and that any second stone for a veteran will be inspected for quarry stamp and base hardware before placement. Second, a temporary rule at the post office that pension cash will be paid to a widow only in person or to an agent presenting a letter witnessed by a deputy at the widow's farm. The judge grants both within county power and tells the postmaster to hang the rule on the window until the federal office answers. Kruger receives his own instruction. The court orders him to mark any private veteran's stone with a clear shop stamp that is not the government quarry code and to refuse any copy as supplied other cemetery without a family signature. He nods because he has seen his ledgers lined up on a table and does not enjoy the view. That afternoon, the sheriff, Boone, and the sextons walk 3 yards with a list of duplicate names and a wrench for base pins. They lift when the deed and the register disagree. They photograph hardware and stamps. They tag 2 more private duplicates for seizure and leave receipts at the church doors. Boone files the photographs under each folder number and writes a simple shelf label for next time: 1 man, 1 stone, 1 grave.